Welcome to the Cyber Philosophy channel. Today we are going to explore the modern French philosopher Levinas and see how he shifted traditional Western philosophy, which started from reason, to one starting from ethics, making it a life practice philosophy with ethics as its ultimate concern.
Thanks for having me on. It's really a critical topic for the times we're living in right now.
It really is. I mean, imagine just for a second that you are standing in front of this massive, cold, algorithmic sorting machine.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and this machine's only purpose is to take every single complex, messy, beautiful human being on Earth and, force them into a neat, tidy, easily definable box.
Right. A terrifying thought.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Today, we are talking about a philosopher who figured out how to jam that terrifying machine. And he didn't do it with a wrench or with violence, but with pure human vulnerability.
Which sounds completely counterintuitive, but it's brilliant.
It really is. And to help you, the listener, understand exactly how he did this, we have a fascinating stack of sources in front of us. We're looking at a comprehensive exploration of Emmanuel Levinas's life and texts, alongside a truly groundbreaking paper titled A Preliminary Exploration of Decentralized Epistemology.
Thank you. Yes, that's the paper we published recently.
And the best part is that sitting right across from me is the author of this very paper. So today, we're going on a mission. We're going to unpack Levinas's core ideas, look unflinchingly at the harsh critiques he faced from his peers, and then use the framework developed in your paper to completely reinterpret his work.
Yeah, and in our paper, we propose a framework that we believe solves some of the biggest, most stubborn misunderstandings about Levinas's work.
I can't wait to get into that.
Because our goal today is really to show you that his philosophy isn't just some, fragmented, overly emotional plea for morality. When you look at it through the right lens, it reveals itself as a complete dynamic system that is incredibly urgent for the society we live in right now.
Right. So let's start with the man himself, because I don't think you can separate these profound ideas from what he actually lived through, right?
No, absolutely not. You can't.
Emmanuel Levinas wasn't just sitting in an ivory tower dreaming up abstract concepts about morality. He was born in Kaunas, Lithuania in 1906 into a Jewish family.
Right, and he grew up deeply immersed in both the Hebrew Bible and the great Russian literary classics.
So a very rich, diverse intellectual background.
That dual cultural inheritance is incredibly important. He had this deep well of religious and literary empathy to draw from. And then in 1928, he travels to Germany to study under two absolute titans of philosophy.
Edmund Husserl and Martin Heidegger.
Exactly. Husserl, who founded phenomenology, and Heidegger. At that specific moment in history, these two men were laying the ultimate groundwork for modern Western philosophy. Levinas was literally at the epicenter of Western thought.
But then the world fractures. World War II breaks out.
Yeah, everything changes.
Levinas is drafted into the French army. He gets captured in 1940 and spends 5 agonizing years as a prisoner of war in a German camp.
5 years.
And while he survives this ordeal, almost his entire family back in Lithuania is brutally murdered in the Holocaust.
It's just an unfathomable tragedy, and it forces a monumental, permanent shift in his thinking.
I mean, how could it not?
Right. Up until that horrific trauma, traditional Western philosophy from the ancient Greeks all the way right up to his teacher, Heidegger, was completely obsessed with ontology.
Wait, let's pause there because that's a heavy philosophical term. What exactly do we mean by ontology in this context?
Good question. Ontology is essentially the study of being itself.
Being with a capital B.
Exactly. It's the philosophical attempt to understand what things are, to define their essence, and to organize reality into a comprehensive system of knowledge.
Like putting everything into its proper conceptual box.
Yes, exactly like your sorting machine analogy. For centuries, this was considered the unquestionable first philosophy. It was the foundation of everything.
But then he goes through the POW camp.
Right. Surviving that camp and witnessing the mechanized horror of the Holocaust made Levinas realize something terrifying about this philosophical tradition. He diagnosed Western ontology as what he called a totality.
A totality. Okay, how does that translate into the real world? Why is the study of being dangerous?
Because a totality acts exactly like that sorting machine. In an ontological system, the ultimate goal is to perfectly understand and categorize everything.
Okay, but understanding sounds like a good thing, right?
You'd think so. But when you try to perfectly understand another human being, what you are really doing is reducing their infinite, unpredictable complexity into a concept that fits comfortably inside your own head.
Oh, wow. I see.
You take their absolute difference, what Levinas called otherness, or in French, alterity, and you aggressively assimilate it. You force it to conform into what he called the same.
So if I look at you, and instead of letting you be a mystery, I just say, oh, you're an academic. You fit into this demographic, you act like this. I am essentially wiping out your uniqueness to make my own worldview feel complete.
You've got it.
I'm forcing your alterity into my version of the same.
Precisely. And on a societal level, Levinas realized that this abstract philosophical mindset directly paved the way for totalitarianism.
Because the system becomes more important than the person.
Exactly. When the grand system, the totality, is more important than the mystery of the individual, then human beings lose their absolute uniqueness. They just become replaceable cogs, mere data points.
And if a data point doesn't fit the system,
well, then wiping out millions of individuals for the sake of the system suddenly becomes logically justifiable.
that is deeply unsettling. He actually experienced the logical conclusion of Western philosophy in that camp.
He did, and he described the horror of this state as pure, anonymous existence. He called it there is, or in French, il y a.
Kilya, what does that feel like?
Imagine a suffocating, dark atmosphere where you are completely stripped of your individuality. You have no name, no dignity, no boundaries.
Just darkness.
Yeah. You are just a nameless piece of biological matter occupying space. It's the sheer horror of existence without being allowed to be a specific, recognized person.
Just breathing in the dark. So if logic and the pursuit of ultimate knowledge created this nightmare, how on earth did he propose we break free from it? We obviously can't outthink the machine if thinking is the machine.
Exactly. You cannot use ontology to defeat ontology. So Levinas makes his radical pivot. He bypasses it entirely.
Bypasses it how?
He argued that we short-circuit the machine through ethics as first philosophy.
Ethics over knowledge.
Yes. He says that before we try to understand the world, before we try to categorize reality, we have a foundational ethical duty. And the core mechanism of this ethical short-circuit is what he calls the face, or in French, le visage of the absolute other.
I want to dig into this mechanism because he doesn't just mean a literal physical face with a nose and eyes, right?
Right. No. The face is a philosophical concept. It is the manifestation of the other person's absolute vulnerability.
Okay, unpack that for me.
When you truly encounter the face of another person, you are encountering something that utterly refuses to be consumed by your categorizing machine. It is completely defenseless, naked, and impoverished.
Vulnerable.
Yes. Yet, and here's the paradox, simultaneously, this immense vulnerability commands a divine, infinite authority.
Wait, vulnerability commands authority?
Yes. Levinas says the very first thing the face silently communicates to you is the fundamental commandment, thou shalt not kill.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. How does extreme weakness translate into infinite authority? Usually in our society, power dictates authority.
Think about a time you've locked eyes with someone in deep distress. Maybe a weeping child who is completely lost, or a stranger in genuine desperate pain. In that split second before your brain starts calculating who they are or why they are crying, what happens to you?
I mean, your ego completely drops. You feel this immediate, almost physical pull to help them. You don't ask for their resume first.
Exactly. That is the authority of the face. Their vulnerability strips you of your power to categorize them. My responsibility to the other predates any logical understanding I have of them.
It predates logic.
Yes. I am held hostage by their vulnerability. Their weakness halts my aggressive attempt to assimilate them.
So empathy isn't a choice we make after we think about a situation. It's an ambush.
An ambush. I like that.
The face hijacks our system. That is brilliant. And he publishes these ideas in his 1961 masterpiece, Totality and Infinity. It sounds like a perfect solution to the trauma of the 20th century.
It does, doesn't it?
But I know it wasn't a fairy tale ending in the academic world.
Far from it, unfortunately. Despite the brilliance of the book, he faced massive, intense, scholarly pushback.
Who pushed back the hardest?
The most formidable challenge came a few years later, in 1964, from the philosopher Jacques Derrida, in a very famous essay titled Violence and Metaphysics.
Derrida, of course.
Yeah. Derrida essentially pointed out a glaring methodological paradox in Levinas's work.
I'm struggling here. If Levinas's whole point is to escape the logical system, the totality, how did he even write a 300-page philosophical book? Doesn't a book require systemic logic, definitions, grammar? Isn't that a trap?
That is precisely the trap Derrida pointed out. To use a popular phrase, Derrida was arguing that Levinas was trying to dismantle the master's house, using the master's tools.
Ah,
In our research, we analyzed this critique deeply. Levinas wanted to completely destroy the Greek tradition of ontology. But to write totality and infinity, he had to use logic, philosophical concepts, and the verb to be.
He had to use the very language of ontology to attack ontology.
Exactly. Because language itself is the ultimate categorizing machine.
Every word is a box.
Yes. Derrida argued that this in itself was a form of conceptual violence. You cannot escape the system while relying on the system's language to communicate your escape.
That is a brutal critique.
And it goes further. Derrida took aim at Levinas's idea of pure alterity, the absolute otherness of the face.
Yeah.
Derrida pointed out a structural flaw.
Which was?
He said, you cannot even recognize absolute difference without the background of the same.
Explain that structural flaw to me. Why do I need the same?
Okay, imagine trying to draw a white shape on a white piece of paper.
You can't see it.
Right. You need a dark background, a system, a baseline identity, just to recognize the contrast, to see the gap where the other exists. Derrida argued they are structurally dependent on each other. You can't have pure alterity floating in a vacuum.
Wow. So Derrida basically cornered him. And because of this, the academic world put Levinas in a box, didn't they?
They really did.
They unilaterally judged him as this beautiful, tragic thinker who was deeply passionate about ethics, but who fundamentally failed at epistemology, the study of how we gain knowledge in metaphysics.
Yeah.
They decided his system was broken.
They did, and that unilateral judgment haunted Levinas. It forced him back to the drawing board to defend his life's work.
And what did he come up with?
In 1974, he published another massive, dense text called Otherwise Than Being or Beyond Essence. And this is where he introduced a crucial, highly nuanced distinction between two concepts in his original French terms, the saint le dire and the sed le dit.
Le dire and le dit. The saying and the said. I need you to unpack the mechanics of this. What is the difference?
Okay, so the sed le dit represents the finalized content of language.
The finished product.
Yes. It is the recorded words, the rigid institutions, the fixed laws, the ontology. The seed is like a signed legal contract. It's static.
Okay, got it.
And the saying.
But the saying, le dire, is the performative, physical act of exposing yourself to the other.
Oh, interesting.
It's the pure, vulnerable openness you offer before the words are finalized. It's not the contract. It's the handshake and the eye contact before the ink dries.
Okay, that makes sense. But doesn't every saying eventually turn into a side? The moment I open my mouth, the words freeze into a system.
Yes, and Levinas admitted that. He conceded to Derrida that every time we speak, we eventually trap the living saying into the rigid said. So did he just give up?
No, he argued that the ethical saying leaves a permanent trace behind. The ghost of that initial vulnerability is still there. So our job isn't to stop speaking or abolish systems.
What is our job then?
Our job is to constantly unsay and disrupt the rigid say to let the ethical saying breathe again.
But wait, even with that explanation, didn't past scholars still look at this and think Levinas was just frantically trying to justify a flawed system?
They did. Many still viewed him as trapped in a paradox, offering only a fractured philosophy.
And this brings us to the turning point of this deep dive, because your paper completely flips this narrative on its head. You don't think he's trapped at all.
We don't. And this is where our framework, which we call integral philosophy, comes into play. We argue that those past scholars were simply far too narrow in their judgment of what constitutes a complete philosophy.
So let's slow down and really ground this integral philosophy framework for the listener. What exactly makes a philosophy integral? What are the moving parts here?
We argue in our paper that any true complete philosophy must contain three dynamically interrelated dimensions.
Okay, 3 dimensions. Hit me.
First, we have ontologicality.
Ontologicality. Ground that for me. What does that look like?
Think of ontologicality as the ultimate metaphysical ideal. It is the beyond, the transcendent purpose, the ultimate good that a philosophy is striving toward.
It's the destination.
Exactly, the destination. The second dimension is noeticity.
Noeticity, I'm guessing this is the machine, the system.
You're right. Noeticity is the epistemology. It is the medium of knowledge, the logic, the language, the structured system of laws. It is the vehicle we use to navigate reality.
Okay, so we have the destination, the vehicle, and
And finally, the third dimension is praxicality.
praxicality, practice, the ethics.
Yes. Praxicality is the real-world action, the immediate ethical responsibility, the boots on the ground.
So metaphysics, knowledge, ethics. Or, in your terms, ontologicality, noeticity, praxicality. Okay, I have the 3 pieces. But how do they interact in your framework? They don't just sit next to each other on a shelf, right?
No, and that is the key. They form a causal, dynamic, rotating loop.
A loop.
One feeds into the other endlessly. The ethics inform the knowledge, which points to the ideal, which demands more ethics.
Wow.
When we apply this integral philosophy lens to Levinas, we realize something profound. Past scholars completely misdiagnosed him.
Because they didn't see the loop.
Right. He didn't lack a complete philosophy. His entry point into this loop was just different because of his historical drama.
Let me try to visualize this. Is it like looking at a three-dimensional building from the foundation up instead of from the roof down?
I like where you're going with this.
Like past scholars looked at Levinas and thought, he's just obsessed with ethics. He forgot to build the roof of knowledge and metaphysics. But your research suggests he just wanted us to build a completely new foundation first, because the old roof traditional ontology had literally caved in and crushed millions of people.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. Yes. Levinas deliberately entered the philosophical loop through practicality,
Through the ethics.
through immediate demanding ethics and the responsibility to the face of the other. He used that raw ethical force to violently break apart the oppressive noeticity.
He smashed the old system, the rigid knowledge and the totalizing system of the city.
Exactly. And he didn't just break it for fun. He broke it in order to point us toward ontologicality.
The infinite, the ultimate metaphysical good.
Yes, a good that exists far beyond traditional definitions of being.
He hits every single point on the loop.
We argue emphatically that he does. Therefore, Levinas' philosophy absolutely is an integral philosophy. He fully embraces the dynamic cycle.
So he isn't just rejecting logic completely.
No, he isn't naive. He recognizes that we absolutely need institutions, logic, language, and laws. We need the state just to survive as a species.
Right.
But his complete philosophy insists that we must continuously, relentlessly disrupt and breathe fresh life into those rigid institutions through our pure, vulnerable openness to the other.
Through the saying.
Yes.
So the goal is not to permanently destroy the system. It's to refuse to let the system become a closed, suffocating room. Every time the door closes, you kick it open again with empathy.
Exactly. You never let the algorithm finalize its sorting.
Which brings us right out of the realm of abstract, mid-century philosophy and drops us squarely into the listener's world today.
It absolutely does.
Because, frankly, we don't live in a vacuum. It's not just you and me sitting alone in a blank room where I can just dedicate my infinite empathy to your face. We live in a wildly complex, overpopulated, global society.
And Levinas was incredibly aware of this complexity. He didn't ignore it at all. He introduced a vital concept to address it called the third, or le tiers.
The third, meaning the moment someone else walks into the room.
Precisely. The moment there's a third person in the world, the pure, completely asymmetrical, devoted relationship between me and the other gets incredibly complicated.
Because there's a competing need.
Right. Because now I have to look at two faces. I have to weigh conflicting needs. I have to calculate. I have to compare.
Let me put myself in that scenario. If I see one vulnerable person, my ethical duty is infinite. But if two different vulnerable people need my help at the exact same time and their needs conflict, I can't be infinite to both.
You can't.
I have to make a judgment call.
Right. The mathematical presence of the whole of humanity, the third, means we inevitably need laws.
We have to build a structure.
Yes, we need politics, courts, and institutions. We need justice. In Levinas's terms, the presence of the third forces us right back into the realm of the side. We have to build the system.
And this is where I think Levinas's modern contribution, viewed through your integral framework, is so vital. Doesn't building that justice system put us right back in danger of creating a new totalitarian sorting machine? What is his ultimate warning to us?
His ultimate warning is exactly that. Political and legal systems must always be grounded in and constantly terrorized by our infinite ethical responsibility to the individual face.
Terrorized by ethics. I love that phrasing.
Yes, state justice is necessary. We need laws to manage the third. But if state justice lacks empathy, if it forgets the vulnerable individual flesh and blood human it was built to serve, it inevitably rots into totalitarianism.
Wow.
A law without empathy is just violence disguised as order.
I want you to really sit with that because we see the high stakes of this everywhere today. We are living in an era of intense, overwhelming cross-border conflicts.
We absolutely are.
We are seeing massive refugee crises where people are desperately fleeing danger. We see deep, angry social polarization in our communities.
Yes, and we can even look at our ecological anxiety through this lens.
Really? How so?
By viewing the environment, nature itself, as a vulnerable other that is silently demanding our care, rather than just viewing it as raw material for our economic algorithm to consume.
Oh, that's incredibly powerful. It forces an incredibly uncomfortable mirror on all of us.
It really does. Levinas's voice is demanding that before we engage in any political calculation, before we retreat to our partisan ideological debates or our legal judgments, we must first answer the silent, asymmetrical call of the vulnerable face.
We have to see the naked humanity first.
Always. Before we apply the demographic category.
Think about the strangers you pass on the street today. Think about the marginalized groups you read about in your newsfeed. Do you immediately try to force them into your own comfortable worldview, or do you allow their absolute difference to stop you in your tracks?
It's a daily challenge.
What stands out to you about this level of responsibility? It's heavy, isn't it? It means you can never just comfortably sit back, look at a tragedy, say, well, the rules are the rules, and wash your hands of it.
You absolutely cannot. And if our integral philosophy framework is correct, it means it requires an endless, exhausting loop of building knowledge and systems and then intentionally shattering them with ethics.
Which means the work is never done.
Never. It means our moral burden is truly never finished. Being human means constantly allowing our comfortable, secure worldviews to be hijacked and rewritten by our real messy encounters with others.
That's a profound way to live.
It means the precise moment we feel absolutely certain and comfortable in our system, that is exactly the moment we must go out and look for the face of the other to disrupt us all over again.
Thank you for listening. I hope this article is helpful and inspiring to you. See you next time.